Alright, everyone, settle down now. Hello, travelers. This is Professor Black. Welcome to Invokation Akademy's TCG-101 series, where we'll learn various TCG concepts through easy-to-understand 10-minute lessons. Our goal is to turn you from a third-rate duelist with a fourth-rate deck into a genius invocation champion. Every now and then, I'll get asked my thoughts about individual cards or get a request to create and discuss a tier list for a certain set of them. While these can be useful starting points, card evaluations can often be more nuanced than just slapping a rating on them. Not to mention, as new characters and cards are released, these ratings can quickly change. Well, as the saying goes, give a TCG player a card rating and they'll be set for a patch, but teach them how to evaluate cards themselves and they'll be set for a lifetime. So today, I'll take you through how I approach card evaluation. Then the next time you look at a new card, hopefully you'll have a framework to use to come to your own conclusions and not just believe what a cat on YouTube tells you. Hey, wait, maybe I didn't think that through. When evaluating cards for Genius Invocation, we can look at three features: efficiency, flexibility, and delay. We'll go over these using two similar cards as an example, Favonius Cathedral and Mondstadt Hashbrown. Efficiency refers to how much raw value the effect provides. In this case, Favonius is 4 HP for 2 dice, while Hashbrown is 2 HP for 1 dice. On rate, they're the same, 2 HP per dice spent, though Hashbrown requires 2 cards to get the same amount of healing, so it's slightly less efficient than Cathedral. Next, flexibility refers to how easy it is to get the effect out of the card. Well, Hashbrown is extremely flexible, being able to be played on any character, and costing 1 die, you're always guaranteed to be able to play it. The only restriction as a food is it makes the character satiated, so you can't play another food card on top of it. Favonius Cathedral, however, is a lot less flexible, costing 2 aligned, making it a little bit harder to play, and it also requires that you end on the character that you want to heal, which you can't always do safely, meaning you don't always get to heal who you would like to most. Finally, delay refers to how long it takes to get the full effect. Hashbrown is instant, getting full value immediately. Cathedral, however, requires you to wait not only until the end of the round, but another round before taking its full effect. Hopefully, it's pretty easy to see now why Hashbrown is played in so many more decks. It's slightly weaker in effect, but way more flexible with an immediate impact on the board. However, newer players will often overvalue efficiency, caring more about the total effect of the card, and not really giving enough weight to the value of flexibility and timing. Of course, that doesn't mean you should only play Hashbrown and never Favonius Cathedral. If your deck includes Tubby, for example, being able to play Favonius for 0 cost makes it a little bit more efficient, making up for its worse flexibility and timing, although in reality, these decks probably will just run both. But the point is, card evaluations change based on what characters and other cards you're using. Understanding this will let you more accurately evaluate how your cards work in your deck, which might be completely different than the same card in another deck. Okay, all this sounds nice in theory, but how do we actually put it into practice? How does this actually tell you which card to put in your deck? Are you supposed to compare every card to every other card? That would be asking a little bit too much. Thankfully though, there is an easier way, which is to compare cards against a baseline card that is known to be good and worth including for most decks. For the 3 most common effects, damage, dice, and card draw, the 3 cards that I use are Hashbrown, Woven, and Strategize. What do these 3 have in common? Well, they're all a good rate on efficiency, but most importantly, they are the most flexible and have 0 delay on their effect, meaning they're universally good and always a great choice for any deck. Deck slots are pretty tight, so generally your cards that you include have to be better or as close to these cards as possible to be worth using. For example, one thing you'll notice is any card more efficient than these baseline cards without giving up much in the way of flexibility or adding delay are meta staples. Cards like Lotus Crisp, Cryo, Pyro, Hydro, and Geo Resonances, Gamblers, Changing Shift, Liban, and Sealy. You probably already knew these cards were strong, but hopefully you now can appreciate why they're so strong as well. There's another grouping of cards that you'll probably recognize that show up a little bit less often, but still used frequently. Cards like Mushroom Pizza, Heavy Strike, Covenant, Northern Smoked Chicken, and Chain the Night. These cards are also very efficient, but unlike the cards in the previous list, are less flexible than their meta counterparts in the average deck. But if you put them in the right deck, this mitigates a lot of their downsides, bringing up their flexibility closer to those baseline cards, and suddenly they become very good. For example, for any deck focused around normal attacks, cards like Heavy Strike and Northern Smoked Chicken are going to be almost as good as Hashbrown or a Woven. And you might ask, what about cards that generate value forever? Things like Artifact, Weapon, and cards like Sumeru City, don't they have infinite efficiency? While technically true, this potential is balanced out by the delay, requiring multiple rounds to get that full value. If you look at most of these effects, generally it's going to take you about 2 uses for them to break even, and 3 for them to reach or overtake their baseline cards. If your deck can reliably get uses out of them over multiple rounds, then they suddenly become worth including. And in the big picture, that's what card evaluation is actually about, not just figuring out which cards are good and which cards are bad, but figuring out when they're good and when they're bad. Once you understand that, you can build your deck with characters and other cards to get around those weaknesses and bring up their power level more to those baseline cards. And if you can do that, your deck is simply going to overpower a lot of other decks just by having more card quality. Of course, doing this is very difficult if you're just starting out, so this is where I do recommend looking at some popular tournament decks and just start playing with them. In particular, pay attention to cards that you find in those lists that you don't really see in a lot of other decks and try and figure out why they're included in the deck and what is their purpose. You can apply similar concepts to character cards as well as action cards, but this is complicated a bit due to skills having elemental applications. So before we evaluate characters, let's briefly look at the value of elemental applications. Just as before, let's establish a baseline, in this case for the average reaction. For the most part, reactions are balanced around having 2 damage worth of value. Think about reactions like Melt, Vaporize, Overload, or Crystallize. While there are other reactions that have 3 damage worth of value like Electrocharge, Superconduct, Burning, Bloom, or Quicken, these tend to come with more restrictions. For instance, Electrocharge and Superconduct do spread out damage, so are a little bit less flexible taking out single characters, while Burning, Bloom, Quicken have delay in their damage. Just as with action cards though, if you can build your deck and characters in a way to get around these downsides, then these reactions are simply better value than their counterparts. This is part of why Electrocharge and Superconduct are so dominant in the meta, but that's something for a different video. For now though, for simplicity, the baseline for an elemental application is typically worth 1 HP of damage. This means by default, most skills that just deal damage on hit are 4 value, 3 damage and applying an element for +1. Skills that do less than this are typically pretty weak and need a very good reason to play them. Part of the reason why we don't see Mirror Maiden much anymore is because her skill was nerfed to only 2 damage, and even though it applies a debuff, that debuff is very conditional and has delay built into it, which makes it a much worse choice than other characters. Efficiency is why characters with 5 cost skills tend to be very strong. Take Nahida's 5 cost for example. It does 3 damage, applying 1 Dendro, which is 4 value, but adds 6 seeds on your opponent's characters, giving a total value of 10 damage. Of course, there is a delay built into this damage, requiring you to trigger reactions in order to get the full amount, but most decks already want to trigger reactions anyway, which is why Nahida is such a popular choice for decks. Evaluating skills in this way will also show you why summons are so strong in the game. Take Fischl skill for example. It does 3 total damage, which is the same as a lot of other skills, but because it applies Electro 3 times, has a total value of potentially up to 6. Of course, this is meant to be balanced out by the fact that it does take multiple rounds to get this effect, so there is a delay, but just like with action cards, putting her in the right deck with the right characters lets you quickly get around this downside. You might also start to see why Fischl is often a more popular choice than a character like Yae. Being able to apply Electro on hit on her skill means her skill has less delay than something like Yae, which has to wait until end of turn before the first Electro hit, making it generally more powerful than Yae's skill. But just like with action cards, the point here isn't to figure out which characters are broken and which ones are trash, it's mostly to figure out when particular skills are good and when they're not. That's all I'm going to say about card evaluation. It's a really complicated topic, much more than can be covered in a simple lesson, and just something that you'll have to practice and get better at over time. Just remember, there's more to a card than just its effect and efficiency. Always keep in mind that flexibility and delay can be just as important. For more advanced lessons, why not try one of my deck labs where I do a deep dive on how to play a single deck. If there's anything you'd like to see in an upcoming video, drop a comment and I'll see how I can help. Be sure to enroll in our courses by subscribing so you can be notified when a new lesson's available. Until then, class dismissed!